The Difficulty of Breathing, a simply complex story. Written by Joe Egley. Narrated by Warner Monroe. 1. Loneliness. That's what I thought life was all about, and being dragged through broken glass on a daily basis. Nothing ever seemed right, and nothing ever went right. It always seemed to be a matter of stepping in the deepest puddle of oily, muddy water in your brand new shoes. Life just seemed to absolutely suck. I really don't mean to seem so emo and blunt about it, but to be honest, that's the way life can be. All up in your face, can't smell the roses for all the shit that's been shoved up your nose. I could sure smell the shit, and let me assure you that it didn't smell good. Okay, I have a story to tell you. It's my story. I know, boring, right? It has its moments. It's no skip through a park, but there are some moments along the way. Some that are sad, some happy, and some that probably shouldn't be put in print. But I can tell you one thing. If you are willing to stay with me, be brave through this mess and not leave me, we can go through this journey together. You can read it as I write it. Deal? Okay then, here we go. Even though it shouldn't matter, my name, dear friend, is Sam. No last name needed, and no explanation granted. Just Sam. Simple, easy, short, and unusual Sam. So many stories start with once upon a time or in a faraway place. But for me and my story, I wasn't sure of how or where to begin. So now I choose the memory my mind goes back to first. When I was growing up, my grandmother told me the story of the man in the moon. I don't know if you know it, but it's the story that if you shared with him your heart's desires and secret wishes, in return he would answer them for you, if you would only listen and pay attention. You had to listen closely, because he could whisper. That always proved to be my problem. I can't seem to listen to the right people. Instead, I usually listened to those who wanted to cause me some sort of trouble, which would always end up with me in a major bind. And I'm not talking about the legs over your head bind either. Although, night after night, I would talk to the man in the moon, hoping that one day he would answer me, that he would tell me the truth, my destiny. I would sit, wait, and listen for him, gazing from star to star. I knew the answers were waiting there for me. They had to be somewhere, hidden within the mysteries of the heavens. I knew that he was there too, the man in the moon. He could answer me. That is, if he would. Maybe he had answered me long ago, and I just wasn't really listening. Maybe he had already told me my story, the one about my person in shining armor, my fairy tale ending that was to come and take me away to happily ever after. Someone to love me, hold me tight, and never let go. Were those just tales told tall? Told to enrich the minds of gullible children, filling them with hopes and dreams that would never be? Disguising a life full of heartache with a veil of hopes and dreams? Think about it. Where's your knight in shining armor? Right? That night, my head slumped from all of this pondering. I practically had a headache. I already knew the answers to my questions. I was doomed, a freak of nature, whose life was set toward a path of chaos from birth. Still, every night I sat and talked to the man in the moon, telling him my side of the story, letting him know that my lonely, desperate heart yearned for that special someone, the one I had asked for so long ago, the one I would never have. That night, however, was a little different. The stars seemed to dance and play among the slow-passing clouds, as if they still existed in the night sky. The moon himself seemed to be smiling at me, as if he knew something. It was one of those looks like, "Have I got a big surprise for you?" Yet his calming peace still had shone down through the dark. A peaceful feeling came over me, keeping me at ease for the moment. It was then that I realized that it really was true. He was trying to tell me something. It was as if he were actually whispering to me. Well, in his own way, of course. It was a feeling that passed through me like lightning. He was talking to me, telling me it would be okay. Just hold on. Just breathe. He told me that my story was coming. It was yet to unfold. But he forgot to mention that it wouldn't be pretty. The love of my life once told me that I was the difficulty of breathing. I'm learning every day how difficult that really is. Two. Before I continue, I need to go back and explain a little more about me, who I am, and why I'm me. Because where I started the story is the beginning, but not really my beginning. I was born in January, several years ago, to a mother I miss dearly, and a father I never really knew, until only recently. See, I thought he was dead. I mean, that's what my uncle had told me, that my father was dead, his own brother. Who does that? But that's really a different story. From what I had heard and understand, my mother wasn't supposed to have children. I had a brother who lived approximately 3 hours or so, due to the fact that most of his organs were underdeveloped or were growing on the outside of his body. He was born, oddly enough, exactly 1 year before me in January. He died the same day. The doctors told her then that she wouldn't be able to have another child, and if she did, it would risk her life and the life of the baby. She was also told that if she did try and have another child, that there might be some abnormalities, serious disabilities, and a slight chance of survival for the baby. So, of course, 1 year later, I was brought into the world. I don't think it was intentional, but it was something that just happened. After a complete checkup, I was deemed fairly normal, at least compared to my brother's birth. Yet something wasn't exactly right. It would be many years before I would realize the difference between me and other kids. It was kept a secret, and still is for the most part. Until now, of course. No one explained it to me until after my mother's death. My mother's death. Now, there's something that no one should have to go through, especially at such a young age, but unfortunately, some of us do. My mother was lost in this world. She was loved by many, but the lack of love she had for herself is what may have cost her her life. She was endlessly searching for love and someone to love her back. Sound familiar? Every time she thought that she had found it, it came with some sort of heartache and pain. So much pain. I remember one of my stepdads beating her and trying to strangle her because she had bought me some socks instead of buying him beer. Another one pummeled her with his fist while she tried to take me and escape. I was so little, all I could do was cry and pee my pants. I couldn't help her. I was too little. What could I have done? All the guys that found her gave her the false sense of comfort until it was always too late and ended the same way. Abused. I remember one time vowing to God that one day I would somehow help her. I didn't know what I would ever be able to do, or how it would happen, but the day came when I prayed for her to die, to release her from her suffering. I am so sorry, Mama. I just wanted you to be safe and not to hurt anymore." The last guy she was with finally talked her into marrying him. Of course, up to that point, everything was okay. But soon the day came when he showed his true colors. He began drinking and taking what little money we had to buy drugs and alcohol. If my mother ever questioned it, she was beaten unconscious. Then he would come after me. The only relief we had was when he had to haul a load somewhere. He was a truck driver, and sometimes he would be gone for days at a time. My mom and I would be okay while he was gone. Just me and her, no one to hurt us. Then he would come home, and one thing or another would set him off. I was molested more times by that man than I can remember. My mother walked in on him once, and he almost killed her. It was then that I knew how to help her. Every night, and especially after a beating, I could hear her crying and asking God for death, to take her from this life. She didn't want to live anymore. She couldn't tell anyone, out of fear of what he might do. So I took it upon myself to talk to God and ask him to help. I love my mother. I loved her more than anything. But I knew that if God took her, she wouldn't suffer anymore and would be loved, held safely in His hands for eternity, and forever out of reach of the pain. I was too young to realize that she would also be out of reach of my little hands. So every night for almost a week, I prayed that God would hear her pleas and answer them. I wanted her to go and be with Grandpa and Grandma. That December, my mother died, almost a week and a half after my prayers had been prayed. I missed her terribly. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder what life would have been like with her still alive. I often daydream that she was never in abusive relationships, and everything had gotten better, and she was still here to love me. Death was something I would become far too familiar with. Most of my family has already departed from this world. To most of those who are still here, I just don't exist. I miss my mom. I miss her always. After her death, things got a little more complicated for me. No one actually knew what my stepdad was doing to me, and for months, no one helped me out of the abuse. Daily, I was threatened with being killed. I tried to run away once, but was caught and beat with a glass bottle until it broke. I tried to tell someone, but not only was I threatened with my death, but he also threatened me that he would kill anyone I told. Sick, right? My 18-year-old stepbrother moved into our house and began abusing and molesting me as well. Sometimes they would both be with me at the same time. I had no one, and nowhere to turn. I thought I just had to learn to live with it. Then one day, at the end of my 4th grade year, I went to school with a black eye, busted lip, and was bleeding from places someone should never have to bleed from. My teacher took care of my problems then. She called child services, and I quickly became a ward of the court. My stepdad and stepbrother were sentenced to 4 years in prison. Moral of that story? Don't take it. Don't have your voice taken from you. I mean it. Fight for life. I finally thought I would have someone to care for me. But anyone who's ever been a ward of the courts can tell you that it usually doesn't always happen that way. I quickly found out that I was a monthly paycheck to my foster family, and that no one really cares about you. Oh, sure, they do what they have to, making sure you're fed, clothed, etc. But no one really cares. I was with my first foster family for only a week after it was discovered that the foster father was molesting the foster kids. He never propositioned me, but I spent hours talking to the police, my caseworker, and a counselor. My caseworker apologized over and over for putting me there. I knew she felt bad about the situation, but I really wanted to scream at her for not making sure we were safe to begin with. I mean, hello, do your job, whatever. Back then, the system was really bad. I only hope they've made improvements, and foster kids have a better shot at being looked after. The second family I was with treated me perfectly at first, but as soon as they discovered they couldn't adopt me, they became mentally and emotionally abusive. Many times, my foster mom forced me to walk the 5 miles to school from the house, while the foster mom loaded everyone else into the van and drove them. The whole family enjoyed calling me stupid, pinching my arms and feeding me bread and water most days. Why? What changed in their eyes? Did I do something? Am I lucky they couldn't adopt me? I wanted them to. I wanted to belong to someone, have someone to want me and love me. Don't you? What changed? The third family that I was placed with didn't really want children and only saw them as money and farm hands. They requested that I be removed from their house when I had accidentally left the chicken coop open and one of their dogs had killed most of the chickens. In another family, my foster mom tried to overdose me on my medications. She was convinced that I had a demon in me and felt compelled by her religious beliefs to purge it from me. It ended with me bleeding from my eyes, nose, and mouth in the middle of a test at school. Let's just say that that family won't be caring for children anymore. The list continues with more abuse, neglect, and much more emotional trauma. At this point, the system ran out of foster homes and tried putting me into a group home, which is basically the same thing, only bigger. It was also at this point I learned how I was different from other kids, and learned about some of the hatred that I had already faced. Before my mother's passing, I had never really questioned whether I was a boy or a girl. I really never completely understood anyway. I had had girls' toys, dolls, ponies, and dress-up clothes. No one ever questioned when I was younger. I looked like a little girl. I had long, blondish hair, and most of my features were feminine. I saw myself as a girl. As a young child, it was no big deal for people, but the older I got, the bigger the problem became. Soon, all that would change. I was no longer a small child. I had now entered the teen years. After a routine checkup by a doctor, it was discovered that I had both male and female parts. The things they were trying to explain to me then just confused me. I didn't understand. I thought everyone was like me. Now here they were trying to tell me how different I was. I couldn't fully understand at that point in my life the things that take place in the womb that create a problem like me. I still don't understand it completely. But it doesn't matter now. They took care of the problem. They decided who I was. After a few weeks of tests and discussions, I was sent to the large children's hospital nearby, where I spent almost a month in recovery, becoming just a boy. I felt like I was constantly being pumped full of drugs, steroids, and hormones. The state made the decision to make me a boy with no considerations for me or what I may have wanted. There really were no other guardians to ask or get permission from, and it was easier and cheaper to just make me a boy. The female part of me wasn't completely developed anyway, and it was easier to place me in foster homes as one or the other, not both. So I became Sam.